storage, and import of hazardous chemical rule. So M stands for manufacture, S stands for storage, I stands for import, H stands for hazardous, and C stands for chemicals. So this is the rule and one of the important rule from the Environment Protection Act, which is related to the hazardous chemicals. So in most of the industries, many companies are using the hazardous chemicals. So when you are going to manufacture the hazardous chemical, when you are going to store the hazardous chemicals, when you are going to import the hazardous chemicals, then this MSIHC 1989 is applicable for you. In some of the companies, they are purely a chemical companies where hazardous chemicals are going to manufacture, obviously store and maybe import. In some of the companies which are non-chemical industries, but they may store the hazardous chemical and having some limited applications. And sometimes some companies require the import of hazardous chemicals. So that is why this MSIHC rule come in exist in 1989 to give some guidelines regarding how to handle, how to store, how to manufacture these hazardous chemicals. So in this rule, in MSIHC rule 1989, there are 20 rules and 12 schedules. So first rule is short title and commencement. Rule 2 is definitions. Rule 3, duties and authorities. Rule 4 is general responsibility of the occupier during industrial activity. Rule 5 is notification of major accident. Rule 6, industrial activity, to which Rule 7 to 15 apply. Rule 7 is notification or sites. Rule 8 is updating of the site notification following changes in the threshold quantity. Rule 8 is transitional provisions. Rule 10 is safety reports. Rule 11, updating of reports under Rule 10. Rule 12, requirement of further information to be sent to the authority. Rule 13, preparation of on-site emergency plan by the occupier. Rule 14, preparation of off-site emergency plans by the authority. Rule 15, information to be given to persons liable to be affected by a major accident. Then Rule 16, disclosure of information. Rule 17, collection, development and dissemination of information. Rule 18, import of hazardous chemicals. Rule 19, improvement notices. Rule 20 is power of central government to modify the schedules. So these are the 20 rules included in this MSIHC rule 1989, and there are 12 schedules. We will discuss all these schedules later on after discussing the 20 rules. So let us discuss one by one all these 20 rules, because normally in the presentation many of the people are focusing only on the important points or the points which they are thinking that is important. But I think then when the acts and rules are discussing, then we should understand each and every rule, so that after the discussion we can decide whether this rule is important from the exam point of view, whether this rule is important from the company point of view or the factory point of view, or whether these rules are important from the pollution control board or the DISH office, that is Department Industrial Safety and Health point of view. Because in industries normally some people are taking care of only the activities which are related to that job profile. So sometimes it has happened that somebody is taking care of this pollution control board concern, somebody is taking care of this factory inspector or the Department of Industrial Safety Health requirements, and somebody is taking care of only the activities which is given by his senior. So it is not the case. When you are talking, you are discussing about the acts and rules, then you should go through all the rules, right? So I will go through all the rules. This is rule 1, short title and commencement. So normally this is the first rule, always there. This rule may be called, so the title of the rule is Manufacture, Storage and Import of Hazardous Chemical Rules 1989. So they shall come into force on the date of their publication in the official gazette. The rule 2 is the definitions. So under these definitions there are various definitions. We will discuss some of them, and some definitions are the general definitions we have already discussed in previous rules. So act, we already know that all these acts are come under the Environment Protection Act 1986. Then authority, the mention in the column 2 and schedule 5. So authority may be the central government, state government authority, local authority, etc. So whatever the authorities examples are given in column 2 of schedule 5 are the authorities for this MSIHC rule 1989. Then exports. So the material which is taking out of India is the export, and the person who is going to involve in this export activity is called as exporter. Then hazardous chemicals means any chemical which is laid down in the part 1 of schedule 1 or column 2 of part 2 of the schedule 1, then column 2 of schedule 2 and column 2 of schedule 3. Generally or simply, whatever the list given in the schedule 1, schedule 2 and schedule 3 are the chemicals which is called as hazardous chemical for this MSIHC rule 1989. Then the definitions like import. So we already know what exactly the import means. So whatever the material or something else which is bringing into India is called as import, and the person which is involved in that activity is called as importer. Then industrial activity. So some of the operations or processes and some isolated storage or the pipelines which are involved, which are related to the hazardous chemicals, that are called as industrial activities. So whatever the operations or the process, that may be a manufacturing, that may be some process, that may be some test, whatever it may be. But if it is related to the hazardous chemicals, and if some chemicals or that is hazardous chemicals are storage, then it is called as isolated storage, and some pipelines are involved for conveying these hazardous chemicals in the premises. So all these activities are called as industrial activity. Then isolated storage means storage of hazardous chemicals other than storage associated with an installation on the same site specified in schedule 4, where the storage involves at least the quantities of that chemical set out in schedule 2. So in these schedules, the list of hazardous chemicals is given with the threshold quantity. So the maximum quantity which you can store, the factory can store in the same premises, so that chemical is called as hazardous chemicals, and the storage of that particular hazardous chemical with that threshold quantity is called as isolated storage. So normally these chemicals are stored in isolated places. Then major accident is one of the important definitions, means an occurrence including any particular major emission, fire or explosion involving one or more hazardous chemicals and resulting from uncontrolled development in the course of an industrial activity, or due to the natural events leading to serious effects both immediate or delayed inside or outside the installation, likely to cause substantial loss of life and property, including adverse effects on the environment. So this is the definition which includes clearly that fire or explosion or some major emissions. So whatever the activity, whatever the accidents which may affects on the life, which may affects on the environment, which may affects on the material loss. So all these criteria is nothing but a major accident. Then pipeline means a pipe or systems of pipes for the conveyance of hazardous chemicals other than a flammable gas as set out in column 2 of part 11 of schedule 3 at a pressure of less than 8 bars absolute. The pipeline also includes the interstate pipelines. So the pipelines which are again related to the hazardous chemicals and which are clearly mentioned in the schedule 3 are called as pipeline, So the fittings are some equipments or the instruments which are directly connected or related to that pipelines which carrying the hazardous chemicals are called as pipeline for this rule. Then schedule, you already know what exactly the schedule is. Then site, site means any location where hazardous chemicals are manufactured or processed or stored or handled, used, disposed of, and includes the whole of an area under the control of an occupier and includes pier, jetty, or similar structure whether floating or not. So if you are manufacture, process, store, or handle any type of hazardous chemicals, then that particular location or that factory company is called as site. So this site is a meaning where you are going to handle these hazardous chemicals. So handling, maybe storing, maybe processing, maybe manufacturing, whatever the activity. But if all these activities are related to the hazardous chemicals, then it is called as site. Then threshold quantity. So normally the threshold quantity is nothing but the maximum permissible quantity by the Ministry of Environment and Forest, or which is given under these schedules of this MSIHC rule. So we know that there are listings of hazardous chemicals in different schedules with the threshold quantity. So that threshold quantity is nothing but the maximum or the permissible quantity by the MSIHC rule. So these are the simple different examples where in the schedule 2 it is given, then in the schedule 3 it is given, then in the schedule 3 and different columns and different parts. So when we are discussing, we will discuss about the schedules, then we will see what exactly this part 1, part 2 is there, what exactly this column 1, 2, 3, etc. Then the rule 3 is focusing on the duties of authorities. The concerned authority shall inspect the industrial activity at least once in a calendar year. So now we have discussed what exactly the industrial activity is. So the hazardous chemical manufacturing, storing, using, applying, etc. All these activities are nothing but the industrial activities. So the authority should inspect these industrial activities at least once in a calendar year. So there is some exceptions. See, if MOEF is there, then there is some exception. That is Ministry of Environment and Forest, and it is subject to other provisions of this rule. Perform the duties specified in the column 3 of Schedule 5. So what exactly the industrial activities are there? What exactly the inspection should be there? And how this MOEF have guided you about this inspection? All these things are given under this Schedule 5. Then rule number 4 discuss about the general responsibility of the occupier during industrial activity. So occupier means a person who is having ultimate control on your factory, that is called as occupier. So the general responsibilities of this occupier during the industrial activity. So we have discussed about this industrial activity. So what are the responsibilities of the occupier? An industrial activity in which hazardous chemical which satisfy any of the criteria laid down in part 1 of schedule 1 and listed in column 2 of part 2 of this schedule is or may be involved, and the isolated storage in which there is involved threshold quantity schedule 2 and column 2. So whatever the activities which are related to the hazardous chemicals, that should be inspected, that should be satisfied with the needs or the guidelines given by this MSIHC. Whatever the isolated storage in your factory, in your premises is there, you should inspect that. Occupier should observe whether all these storage are as per norms, whether all these storage are as per the threshold quantity or not. So this is the responsibility of the occupier. Then the next responsibility is an occupier who has control of an industrial activity in terms of sub rule 1 shall provide evidence to show that he has identified the major accident hazards. So this is the next responsibilities of the occupier, that he should identify the MH, that is major accident hazard. So we have already discussed about this major accident. So major accident may be a fire, that may be a explosion, that may be a major emission. So the activities which are directly affected on the person's life, that may be effect on the environment, that may be a major loss of material or damage to the structure. So all these are nothing but the major accidents. So if any potential is there in the process, in the machinery, in the storage, in the manufacturing steps. So if any major accident hazard is there, that should be identified, and occupier should take the adequate steps to reduce this major accident hazard, to control this major accident hazard. Then they take adequate steps to prevent such major accidents and to limit their consequences to persons and the environment. Provide to the persons working on the site with the information, training and equipment, including antidotes necessary to ensure their safety. So we have already discussed that you should identify, that occupier should identify the major accident hazard. The occupier should take adequate steps to avoid, to prevent these major accidents and the consequences of these major accidents, and the information related to this major accident, what exactly the major accident is, what are the major accident hazard, how to prevent it, what are the safety measures related to this major accident hazard. All this information should be provided to all the employee, all the worker, through the training awareness programs, maybe through some equipment or some SOPs, some signboards, some displays, and it also includes the antidotes necessary to ensure their safety. Then the rule 5, focusing on the notification of the major accidents. So we have already discussed about the major accident. In case if a major accident happens, occurs on a site or in a pipeline, the occupier shall within 48 hours notify the concerned authority as identified in Schedule 5. So how exactly you should report, that is given in detail, the total detail information is given in the Schedule 5, but after occurring an major accident, you should report to the concerned authority within 48 hours. That is the first criteria. Then the concerned authority shall, on receipt of the report, should undertake a full analysis of the major accident and send to the MOEF. Then that concerned authority steps taken to avoid any repetitions of this major accident, and concerned authority shall compile this information regarding this major accident, and then concerned authority shall in writing inform the occupier of any lacuna which in its opinion needs to be rectified to avoid the major accident. So these are the different steps under these notifications, that after occurring a major accidents within 48 hours you have to report the concerned authority, which is the guidelines are given in the Schedule 5, and the concerned authority after receiving this Schedule 5 or the total report, they are going to have analysis or a full analysis on this major accident. Then what are the steps taken to avoid this repetition, that should be checked by the concerned authority. Then they are going to compile all the information, and the concerned authority in the writing inform the occupier that if any lacuna is there, if any loopholes is there, in any negative point is there in their opinion, then all these points, all these preventive actions or the corrective actions should be taken. So all these things should be rectified, that is in the positive manner, to avoid the major accident. So in this notification, the main objective is to avoid the repetition of these major accidents. Then rule 6, focusing on the industrial activity, to which rules 7 to 15 apply. So whatever the industrial activities, we have already discussed about this industrial activity. That may be an operation, that may be a process, that may be a manufacturing process, that may be some other processes, that may be a isolated storage, that may be a pipeline. So all these things which are related to the hazardous chemicals are nothing but the industrial activities. So an industrial activity in which there is involved a quantity of hazardous chemical, which is listed in column 2, schedule 3, which is equal to or more than the quantity specified in the entry of that chemical in column 3 and 4. So rule 10 to 12 only for column 4, and isolated storage in which there is involved quantity of hazardous chemicals, column 2 and schedule 2, which is equal to or more than quantity specified in the entry of that chemical in column 4. So we have to observe what exactly this column 2 of schedule 3, column 2 of schedule 3, and column 3 of and 4 of these schedules, and rule number 10, 11 and 12, so that you can understand what exactly this rule is and how it is applicable to rule number 7 to 15. So for the purpose of this 7 to 15 rules, this new industrial activity means any industrial activity which commences after the date of coming into the operation these rules. So if the activity is added later on after the date of coming into the operation of these rules, then it is called as new industrial activity. Why this new word is there? Because this industrial activity is added after the date of commencement of these rules. Or if some activity is modified, rectified, some changes are made in that activity, then also it is called as new industrial activity. So under this new industrial activity, these are the two sub points. And an existing industrial activity means an industrial activity which is not a new industrial activity. So existing means the activities which are present already, which are available already before commencement of the these rules. So before commencement of the date of this rule is called as existing industrial activity, and after the date of commencement or after some modification or changes in the activity, then it is called as new industrial activity. Then rule number 7, that is notification of site. An occupier shall not undertake any industrial activity or written report to be concerned authority containing the particulars specified in schedule 7 at least 3 months before commencing the activity. So if you are going to do some activity, if you are going to add some activity, if you are going to start some activities, that may be a new activity, that may be an activity after a major accident or after some incident. So if it is the case, then you have to provide all this information. You have to take the permission from the concerned authority with reference to the guidelines given in the schedule 7 at least 3 months before commencing that activity, right? Then the concerned authority within 60 days from the date of receipt of the report shall approve that report. So the report which is submitted to the concerned authority with reference to this schedule 7 should be approved within the 60 days from the date of receipt. So that is the responsibility of the concerned authority. Then rule 8 is focusing on the updating of the site notification following changes in the threshold quantity. So if you are going to change some isolated storage quantity or some manufacturing quantity or some quantity which is related to the pipelines, and all these activities are related to the hazardous chemicals, then you have to update the data and that should be submitted to the concerned authority. So where an activity has been reported in accordance with the rule number 7 and the occupier makes a change in it which affects the particular specified in the report or any subsequent report made under these rules, the occupier shall forthwith furnish a further report to the concerned authority. That is the case. Why it is required? Because when you are changing the quantity of a hazardous chemical, if you are changing the material flowing capacity of the pipelines, if you are changing the storage quantity of, you are changing the quantity in the operation or the manufacturing process, then major accident hazard identification may be a different case. If the hazards are different, if the hazards are becoming severe from the normal case, then you have to take some safety measures, you have to take some steps to avoid the major accidents. And for that purpose, you have to again make a modified report and you should submit it to the concerned authority. Then ninth rule is transitional provisions, where at the date of coming into operation of these rules, an occupier is in control of existing industrial activity which is required to be reported under Rule 7 or within 6 months after that date. An occupier commences any such new industrial activity. So within 6 months after that date, an occupier commences and such new industrial activity. It shall be sufficient compliance within that rule if it reports to the concerned authority as per the particular in Schedule 7 within the 3 months after the date of coming into operation of these rules, or with such longer times as the concerned authority may agree in writing. So if the case is with respect to rule number 7 or with respect to Schedule 7 within 3 months, then there is no change. But if there is a change, if there is modification, then you should provide the data again, that is modified data or the new industrial activity in written form to the concerned authority. Then rule number 10 is again an important rule as far as the exams are concerned, as far as the interviews are concerned. So this focusing on the safety reports and safety audit reports. Subject to the following paragraphs of this rule, an occupier shall not undertake any industrial activity to which this rule applies unless he has prepared a safety report. So you have to prepare a safety report after an accident or before starting an activity or before starting an industrial activity. On that industrial activity containing the information specified in Schedule 8 and has sent a copy to the report to the concerned authority. So these safety reports format or the detailed information is given in the Schedule 8, and as per this Schedule 8 you have to make a safety report and that should be submitted to the concerned authority. In the case of new industrial activity which an occupier commences or by virtue of sub rule 2A2 of rule 6 is deemed to commence within 6 months after coming into operation of this rule, it shall be sufficient compliance with sub rule 1 of this rule if the occupier sends to the concerned authority a copy of the report required in accordance with the sub rule within 90 days after the date of coming into the operation of these rules. So you have to submit this report and within 6 months after coming into the operations you have to submit this detailed report, and again that should be sent, that is a copy of this report is sent to the other concerned authorities also. So within 90 days that should be completed. So safety report making with reference to Schedule 8 is essential. Then in case of any existing industrial activity, the occupier shall prepare a safety report in consultation with the concerned authority and submit the same within 1 year from the date of commencement. So before commencing this MSIHC activity, then you have to submit this safety report within 1 year before starting the actual activity. So whatever the information which is related to the hazardous chemicals, their characteristics of these chemicals, their hazards, that may be a fire hazard, that may be a chemical hazard, that may be some reaction data, that may be some parameters data, that may be some packaging guidelines, that may be some handling guidelines. So whatever the detailed information which is under this safety report, that should be submitted to the concerned authority before starting this activity within 1 year. So this is the guidelines which are given in the amendment, that is MSIHC rule 1994. After the commencement of this MSIHC 1994, the occupiers of both the new and existing industrial activity shall carry out an independent safety audit. So with reference to this MSIHC rule 1994, that is the amendment, occupiers of both, that is new activity and the existing industry. So occupier may change or the rights of the occupier may change. So for that purpose, the new industrial activities and the existing industrial activities should go through the safety audit, and that carry out of its independent safety audit is an essential task. So For this audits, respective industrial activities with the help of the expert not associated with such industrial activities should be involved, and the safety audit should be done. So on the basis of this safety audit, you have to make a safety audit report. The occupier shall forward a copy of this auditor's report. So that is a safety audit report, and that is why for this rule, before 1994, this rule number is only safety report. After 1994 amendment, this is and safety audit report is added. So safety audit is a mandatory condition after 1994, and the report of the safety audit should be submitted to the concerned authority within 30 days after the completion of this such audit. The occupier shall update the safety audit report once a year by conducting a fresh safety audit and forward a copy of it with his comments thereon within 30 days. So again, that in the next year you have to conduct a fresh safety audit. You have to make a safety audit report again, and that safety audit report should be submitted to the concerned authority within a month. The concerned authority may, if it deems fit, issue improvement notice under Rule 19 within 45 days of the submission of the said report. So after completion or after submission of this report, if you want to improve, if you want to change something in that report, then you can change and modify the report, and you can submit it within the 45 days of the submission. Then Rule 11 is the updation of this report under Rule 10. So we have discussed about this Rule 10, that is nothing but the safety report and safety audit reports. So we have discussed about when the safety report and when the safety audit report is needed. Now the updation of this safety reports and safety audit report is Rule 11. So where an occupier has made a safety report in accordance with this sub rule 1 of Rule 10, he shall not make any modification to the industrial activity to which that safety reports relates, which could materially affect the particulars in that report. Suppose if you have already made the safety report and you have submitted that safety report with reference to the industrial activity, now this industrial activity are nothing but the existing industrial activity, because you have already given the information related to this industrial activity in that safety report, and you are not authorized to change in that industrial activity in the premises, because you have already submitted all the information related to that activity to the concerned authority, unless he has made a further report to take account. If you want to change some activity, if you want to modify some activity, some process, some operations, then you have to take the permission, and after getting the permission, you have to again modify that report, and you should submit the modified report, that corrected or rectified report, to concerned authority within 90 days after making these modifications. Then where an occupier has made a report in accordance with the Rule 10 sub Rule 1 of the rule and the industrial activities containing, the occupier shall within 3 years of the date of the last such report make a further report which shall have regard in particular to new technical knowledge which has affected the particulars in the previous report relating to safety and hazard assessment. So if some modification is there, if some changes are required, if some corrections are required, if some suggestions and valid requirements are there in the industrial activity, then you can change, modify, rectify as per the valid suggestions, but that should be again made a changes in that safety report, and that safety report should be submitted to the concerned authority within the 3 years of the time span, and shall within 30 days send a copy of the report to the concerned authority. So even if you are not going to change a major in the industrial activity, but there may be some technological changes, there may be some valid suggestions, that may be some suggestions by auditor or some internal auditor or some internal observer or the supervisor. If you think or the occupier think that these suggestions are valid, then you can correct or rectify these changes in the operations, but you have to make a safety report after modification or rectification, and you have to submit that report again. Then rule 12 is the requirement for further information to be sent to the authority. So we have already discussed in the rule 10 and 11. In the rule 10, you have to submit the safety report and safety audit report. In the rule 11, we have discussed about the updation in the, if you are changing or adding some new activities in the existing industrial activities, then you have to update the report and submit to the concerned authority. So by a notice served on the occupier, require him to provide such additional information as may be specified in the notice, and the occupier shall send this information within 90 days. So this information is nothing but the rule 12, the requirement for further information to be sent to the concerned authority. Then rule 13 is the preparation of on-site emergency plan by the occupier. So this is one of the important rule as far as the exams interviews are concerned. So what exactly the on-site emergency plan is there? How to prepare this on-site emergency plan, and what are the contents, what are the schedule which are related to this on-site emergency plan. So an occupier shall prepare and keep up to date how major accidents will be dealt with on the site. So if you are going to deal on the site, then it is called as on-site, and that is why that emergency plan is called as on-site emergency plan, right? So it is the contents which are in detailing are given in the schedule 2. So this on-site, which the industrial activity carried on that plan, which include the name of the person who is responsible for the safety on the site, and the names of those who are authorized to take the action in accordance with the plan in case of emergency. So you have to give the information who is the main responsible person for on-site emergency, and other members who are also responsible to tackle this emergency situation on the site. So all this information should be given in the on-site emergency plan. The occupier should ensure that the emergency plan prepared in accordance with the sub-rule 1 takes into account any modification made in the industrial activity, and that every person on that site who is affected by the plan is informed of its relevant provisions. So all the information which is related to this on-site emergency plan should be conveyed to all the workers, all the employees which are present on the site, and that is important, because unless and until you have provided this information, the persons or the employees are not knowing what to do after creating or after occurring an emergency. Then the occupier shall prepare an emergency plan in the case of new industrial activity before that activity is commenced, in the case of an existing industrial activity within 90 days of coming into operation of these rules. So whatever the existing industrial activities are there, so within 90 days you have to prepare on-site emergency plan. If some addition of some industrial activities, some modification of some industrial activities are there, then in the case of new industrial activity, you have to prepare on-site emergency plan again. Because after changes, after modification in the activities, the hazard identifications, the risk involved, and the different activities are changing, and that is why we have to change in the on-site emergency plan too. The occupier shall ensure that a mock drill of the emergency plan is conducted every 6 months. So the plan which you have prepared, that is on-site emergency plan, so mock drill is an essential condition in every 6 months. So the emergency plan may be related to the LNG, CNG storage, that may be related to the hydrogen storage, that may be related to a particular gas pipeline or the toxic chemicals pipeline or a hazardous chemical pipeline, that may be related to the manufacturing of or the processing of the hazardous chemicals. So whatever it may be, mock drill should be done every 6 months. A detailed report of the mock drill conducted under sub-rule 4 shall be made immediately available to the concerned authority. So after conducting this mock drill, we have to submit the detailed report of this mock drill to the concerned authority. Then rule number 14 is focusing on the preparation of offsite emergency plan. So rule 13 is related to the on-site emergency plan. Now rule 14 is related to the off-site emergency plan. So the emergency plan preparing for the off-site. So column 2 of schedule 5 to prepare and keep up to date. An adequate off-site emergency plan containing details specified in the schedule 2. So in the schedule 2, all the detailed information, all the elements or the parameters are given. Which parameters should be filled for this offsite emergency plan, how emergencies relating to the possible major accidents on that site will be dealt with, and in preparing that plan, the concerned authority shall consult the occupier and such other person as it may be necessary. So in every case, that may be on-site emergency plan, that may be off-site emergency plan, that may be a safety audit, that may be some other activities. So when the major activities are there, the occupier is the main responsible person. And under the occupier can give the rights, give the authority to other members who can handle this type of emergencies. For the purpose of enabling the concerned authority to prepare the emergency plan required under sub-rule 1, the occupier shall provide the concerned authority with such information relating to the industrial activity under his control as the concerned authority may require, including the nature, extent and likely effects of offsite of possible major accidents, and authority shall provide the occupier with any information from the offsite emergency plan which relates to his duties under the rule number 13. So rule number 13 already says the on-site emergency plan. Now we are discussing about the off-site emergency plan, and for that purpose, whatever the supervision, whatever the observation, whatever the hazard identification have already done in that factory, that all information should be given to the concerned authority, and so that we can prepare a particular safe offsite emergency plan. And in the offsite emergency plan, the responsible person details also should be added. The concerned authority shall prepare its emergency plan required under sub-rule 1 in the case of new industrial activity. So it is again applicable in the same way as it is in the on-site emergency plan. If you are going to add some activity, if you are going to modify some industrial activity, then you have to prepare on off-site emergency plan in a new manner because the activity is changed. In case of an existing industrial activity, within 6 months of coming into operation of these rules, you have to prepare the repair. Please note that in the on-site emergency plan, this industrial activity, new industrial activity is same, but the criteria for this existing industrial activities within 90 days. Now in the off-site emergency plan, it is within 6 months of coming into operation of these rules. The concerned authority shall ensure that a rehearsal of the off-site emergency plan is conducted at least once in a calendar year. So as far as the on-site emergency plan is concerned, you have to conduct a mock drill within 6 months. Now as far as this off-site emergency plan is concerned, you have to conduct a rehearsal within a calendar year, at least once in a calendar year. Now the rule number 15 is focusing on the information to be given to persons liable to be affected by a major accident. So whatever the information is there, that should be given to the persons which is liable to be affected by a major accident. The occupier shall take appropriate steps to inform persons outside the site, either directly or through district emergency authority, who are likely to be in an area which may be affected by a major accident, about the nature of the major accident hazard, the safety measures, the do's and don'ts which should be adopted in the event of major accidents. So all this information should be given to the persons. So what exactly the nature of major accident hazard, whether this is maybe a explosion, whether it is maybe a major fire, whether it is maybe a major emission, whether it is maybe a major leakage from the pipelines, whether it is a major fire or leakage from the isolated storage, whether it may be a highly reactive or highly reactive chemical reactions. So there may be a different examples. So whatever the nature of this major accident hazard, that should be informed to the concerned person, and also the safety measures and especially the do's and don'ts which should be adopted in the event of major accidents. The occupier shall take the steps required under the sub-rule 1 to inform persons about the industrial activity before that activity is commenced, except in the case of existing industrial activity, in which case the occupier shall comply with the requirements of sub-rule 1 within 90 days of coming into operation of these rules. So whatever the existing activities are there, you have to already inform to the concerned persons to that activity, what exactly that activity is, what is the nature of that activity, what may be the different hazards, what are the levels of that hazards. So the hazard may be a mechanical hazard, a fire hazard, a health hazard, a physical hazard, ergonomical hazard, environment hazard, whatever it may be. So whatever the nature, whatever the level, all these types, all this information should be given to the persons after modification or after adding a new industrial activity. So that should be done within the 90 days of coming into operation of this rule. Then rule 16 is the disclosure of information. So you know that we are discussing about the hazardous chemicals. So the information, the physical characteristics, the chemical characteristics, the fire hazard, the explosion hazard, the health hazard, the precautionary measures, the safety measures, whatever the information related to these hazardous chemicals, which we are going to handle in the operations, in the storage, in the uses, in the applications, in the operations, that all information should be disclosed, and that is rule number 16, where for the purpose of evaluating information notified under rule 5, 7 to 15, the concerned authority disclose the information to some other persons. That other persons shall not use the information for any purpose except for the purpose of concerned authority disclosing it, and before disclosing the information, the concerned authority shall inform that other persons of these obligations under these paragraphs. So the information should be provided in such a way that you have to taken care, you have to prepare for the safety actions, safety measures, you have to avoid the repetitions of the major accidents, and that information should be disclosed to the public or to the different persons. But it is not the case. What exactly the formula is, how to manufacture this particular product. So all this information can't be provided by each and every activity, each and every company, because some data is confidential data. So all data can't be disclosed. So some of the data can be a confidential data. But the data which is related to the hazard, which is related to the adverse impact on the persons, adverse impact on the vicinity of that company, then that data should be provided to the other persons also. Then rule 17 is the collection, development and dissemination of information. So indirectly we are called it as safety data sheet or material safety data sheet. So the collection of all these hazardous chemicals, the changes, testing, development of all this information and dissemination of these informations. So all these activities combinedly, it is called as safety data sheet, and all these safety data sheet should be prepared by the manufacturer or the supplier, and that should be conveyed to all the employees in the companies. So if you are going to handle, if you are going to store, if you are going to use that chemical in the company in any type of industrial activity, then MSDS or the safety data sheet should be known to the concerned person. Normally it should be known to all the persons, because you should know the physical, chemical or other characteristics of that particular chemical in the case of emergencies. So this rule shall apply to an industrial activity in which a hazardous chemical which satisfy any of the criteria laid down in part 1 of schedule 1 and is listed in column 2 of part 2 of the schedule or may be involved. So we will uh, observe the details of this schedule 1 which is related to this safety data sheet, and then schedule 9 which is exactly the SDS. An occupier who has control of an industrial activity in terms of sub-rule 1 of this rule shall arrange to obtain or develop information in the form of safety data sheet as specified in schedule 9. So in this schedule 9, all the parameters are involved in this safety data sheet are mentioned. The information shall be accessible upon request of reference. So the guidelines are given under this schedule 9, but in the factory, for understanding this safety data sheet in a simple manner, you have to convert these safety data sheet parameters into local language or in the Hindi language to understand by each and every worker. Then the occupier, while obtaining or developing a safety data sheet as specified in schedule 9 in respect of hazardous chemical handled by him, shall ensure that information is recorded accurately and reflects the scientific evidence used in making this hazard determination. So you should take care of this accuracy and the evidences before finalizing this MSDS. In case any significant information regarding hazards of chemical is available, it shall be added to the material safety data sheet as specified in schedule 9 as soon as practicable. Every container of a hazardous chemical shall be clearly labeled or marked to identify the contents of the container, the name and address of the manufacturer or importer of the hazardous chemicals, the physical, chemical, toxicological data as per the criteria given in part 1 and schedule 1. So in the schedule 1, the toxicological data is given, and with reference to that data, you should label the container in that manner that you should understand what are the contents of these containers, what is the name and address of that manufacturer of these hazardous chemicals, because in case of accident, in case of leakage, you have to contact that responsible person, then you have to contact that manufacturer. That is why this data is essential on the label or marking systems. And other data like physical, chemical and toxicological data should be also important, because if you are using the fire extinguisher, if you are using water for cooling systems, or if you are using some other materials or the methods, then before adopting all these materials, before adopting all these methods to control that accident, to control that leakage, to control that fire, you should know the physical, chemical and toxicological data of that particular chemical. So in some cases, some toxic chemicals are there, so that may have limit to 1 to 3 ppm only, so that may adversely affect on your health, that may adversely affect on your respiratory systems, that may be affect on the skin, eyes or any part of your body. So that you should know the detailed information about this hazardous chemical, and then only you should control that accident as per the safety guidelines only. Because in some of the cases, water is a media where that hazardous chemical is reacting fast. So in some cases, like active metals like sodium, if you are spraying the water to extinguish the fire where the sodium is there, then in some of the cases also, like insecticide or the pesticide, if you are using the water for extinguish the fire, so in the sodium case or in the active metal case or in the pesticide case also, it is the guidelines are given that you have to avoid the water and you can use the foam or the powder instead of water, because water can react fast with the active metals, and when water is added in the pesticides, then the toxic solution is prepared as compared to the pesticide itself. So for that purpose, you should know all these compatibility data, physical data like melting point, freezing point, boiling point, etc. Then some chemical data, some chemical information or chemical reactions, and some toxicological limits. That may be a TLV, that may be a LD50, LC50 data. So depending on the solid, liquid or gaseous formation, all this data is available. Then in items of sub-rule 4 of this rule, where it is impracticable to label a chemical in view of the size of the container or the nature of the package, provision should be made for other effective means like tagging or accompanying documents. So where this labeling or marking is not possible, then you have to provide this information that is essential. So you can provide this information with the help of tags or with the help of document attachments in that particular packaging. So you can understand that some of the chemicals which are hazardous and they are having the containers or packaging elements are too small that you can't label that particular packaging material, and that is why some documents are attached or added into the package material. But providing the information related to the hazardous chemical is essential as per this rule number 17 is concerned. Then rule number 18, import of hazardous chemicals. So while importing the hazardous chemicals, we have to follow these guidelines. This rule shall apply to a chemical which satisfy any of the criteria laid down in part 1 of the schedule 1 and is listed in column 2 of part 2 of the schedule. Any person responsible for importing hazardous chemical in India shall provide the detailed information like the name and address of the person receiving the consignment in India, the port of entry in India, the mode of transport from the exporting country to India, the quantity of chemical is being imported, and complete product safety information. So all this data should be given to the concerned authority before applying this import activities, right? So you have to give this information, name, address of the persons, then port, then mode of transport, quantity of chemicals, and complete product safety information. If the concerned authority of the state is satisfied that chemical being imported is likely to cause major accidents, it may direct the importer to take safety measures. So if the concerned authority is thinking that whatever the chemical you have ordered for this importing, then if it may cause a major accident, then concerned authority may ask to that importer to take such safety measures related to that safety chemicals or hazardous chemicals. In case the concerned authority of this site is of the opinion that the chemicals should not be imported on safety or on environmental consideration, such authority may direct stoppage of such import. So concerned authority is having these rights, this power to reject these import activities on the basis of some safety concern, on the basis of some environmental concerns. The concerned authority at the state shall simultaneously inform the concerned port authority to take appropriate steps regarding the safe handling and storage of the hazardous chemicals. So concerned authority is going to give the information to the port where this imported material is going to land, and the port authority should take the appropriate step for safe handling and storage of this material. Any person importing hazardous chemical shall maintain the records of these hazardous chemicals imported as specified in Schedule 10. So, how to record these details of these imported hazardous chemicals? The guidelines are given in the Schedule 10. Records to maintain shall be open for inspection by the concerned authority at the state or the Ministry of Environment and Forest or any officer appointed by them in this behalf. So, the main concerned authority is MOEF or that related state, respective state, and the detailed information should be given as per the Schedule 10. The importer of hazardous chemicals or a person working on his behalf shall ensure that transport of hazardous chemicals from port of entry to the ultimate destination in accordance with the Central Motor Vehicle Rule 1989 and frame under the provision of Motor Vehicle Act 1989. So whatever the guidelines provided by this Central Motor Vehicle Rule 1989 for the transportation of these hazardous chemicals from the port where that hazardous chemical land and to the destination, so that transportation guidelines are given under this rule, that is CMV rule 1989. Then rule number 19 is improvement notices. So if there is a change, is there any improvement in activity, then you have to take the notice, you have to submit the information to the concerned authority. That is the improvement notices. If the concerned authority is of opinion that a person has contravened the provision of this rule, the concerned authority shall serve on him a notice requiring that person to remedy the contravention, or as the case may be, a notice served under this rule specify the measures to be taken by the occupier in remedying the said contraventions. So whatever the precautionary measures, whatever the safety measures have to be taken while handling this industrial activity, which is mentioned in the definitions. So all the activities should be carried out with some safety practices, safety measures only. If it is not the case, then notice can be sent by the concerned authority to the occupier, and then on the basis of that notice, you have to take the safety measures or the remedial solutions for that particular corrective measures. Then rule number 20 is the power of the central government to modify the schedules. So there are 12 schedules mentioned under this MSIHC 1989, and the power of the central government is to modify these schedules. So central government can modify these schedules. They can modify the titles, the numbers, the detailed informations or the parameters which are involved under these schedules. So the amendment or the modifications can be done with the help of central government or the Ministry of Environment and Forest. So these are the 20 rules under this MSIHC rule 1989, and maybe after some days there may be some amendments, some modifications may be there. So depending on the requirement, depending on the valid suggestions to the government, and on the basis of that, central government can modify these schedules or the rules. So now we will discuss the schedules, because in the 20 rules we have read that column 1, column 2, column 3, schedule 1, schedule 2, schedule 3, schedule 8, schedule 9, etc. So what exactly these schedules are? So we must at least know what exactly the schedule is, what exactly the title of that schedule is, because the title itself suggests that what exactly it going to focus. Then what is the reference of that schedule means rule number, and what are the main contents of that schedule. It is not possible to learn each and every schedule, each and every element of the schedules. That is why I have mentioned in the presentation the what exactly the start is, what exactly the end is, and what are the main contents or the main parameters or the main titles or the subtitles of that schedule is, right? So let us discuss one by one what exactly the schedules are. So this is the schedule 1. So schedule 1 focusing on the indicative criteria and list of chemicals. So what is the reference of this schedule? If you want to refer the detailed information, so in the rule 2E1, 4IL, A and 42 and 1718. So these are the reference rules. So if you want to check the exact references for this schedule, then you can go to the rule again. And if you want to check what exactly the linkage, what is the reference, then after reading that particular rule, you can understand this rule is applicable to this schedule and this schedule is applicable or linked to the rule, right? So the list of chemicals, so indicative criteria and the list of chemical is given in this schedule 1. Under this schedule, again there are two parts. This is part 1. So this part 1 focusing on the different list of chemicals and their limitations. So what exactly the chemicals are? First, that is A, toxic chemicals. So the chemicals having the following values of acute toxicity and which owing to the physical and chemical properties are capable of producing major accident hazard. Now in the rules of this MSIHC, we have mentioned that the responsibilities of occupier is to identify the major accident hazard. So how to identify this major accident hazard? This is one of the parameters. So you have to identify the chemicals having the toxicological data, physical data and chemical data. So this is one of the parameter, that is toxic chemicals. So you can observe this table. In this table you can identify the serial number, toxicity. So if the chemical is of toxic nature, then toxicity is the characteristics of that chemical. So toxicity may be extremely toxic, may be highly toxic, and may be a toxic. So how to define this extremely, highly, and toxic? So it depends on the LD50 value, that may be through oral toxicity, that may be through dermal toxicity, and LC50 value, that may be through inhalation toxicity. So what exactly this LD50 means? So L stands for lethal, D stands for dose, and this 50 stands for 50%. So if you are consuming this more than 5 mg per kg chemical in your body, then there are chances, that is the chances are 50%. The chances of fatality, chances of death. So if you are going to consume 5 milligram per kg of your body, then there are 50% chances of your death. So if your body weight is 50 kg, then you have to multiply that 5 parameters. So for 50 kg, you can understand this is the parameter, that is 5 mg per kg. If your body weight is 50 kg, then you have to multiply this 5 into 50. So 5 into 50, that is 250 mg per 50 kg is the oral toxicity for that particular chemical. It means there are 50% chances of your death when you are consuming 250 milligrams of that particular toxic chemical in your body. If your body weight is 100 kg, then that mg may change from 100 into 5, that is 500 mg per kg. And that is why when you are consuming this chemical through the mouth, then it is called as oral toxicity. When you are consuming this chemical, these toxic chemicals through the skin, then it is called as dermal toxicity. And when you are consuming these chemicals through the respiration system, through the nose, then it is called as inhalation toxicity. And this is in terms of gases or vapor, that is why it is in terms of concentration rather than the dose. So it is LC50, the meaning is one and the same as it is LD50. So when you are using these vapors or the gases, that is why the concentration terms is incorporated in this case, and mg per liter. So here now it is per liter instead of kg, right? So on the basis of these numbers, you can define these toxic chemicals. If more than 5 mg per kg is the toxicity through the digestion or through the mouth, that is oral toxicity, then it is called as extremely toxic. So if it is less than 40 mg per kg, then it is a dermal toxicity range, and that is again extremely toxic. If it is less than 0.5 mg per liter through the inhalation, then it is also an extremely toxic case. Likewise, you can understand from 5 to 50, LD50 oral, extreme highly toxic. Then from greater than 40 to 200, LD50 dermal toxicity, highly toxic. And then here it is actually more than 0.5, more than 0.5 to 2, through the inhalation, LC50 highly toxic, and likewise again for the toxic 50 to 100, 200 to 1000, and 2 to 10. So this table clearly defines what exactly the toxic chemicals are and whether this chemical, that is toxic chemicals, is extremely toxic or highly toxic. So depending on this number and depending on the method of inhalation, method of the inhalation through the skin or that may be through the oral. So depending on that method also, this extremely highly and toxic chemicals are defined. Then the second case in the part 1 of the schedule 1 is flammable chemicals. So these flammable chemicals, in that flammable chemicals also there are subcategories. So first is flammable gases. So gases which at 20 degrees Celsius and at standard pressure of 101.3 kilopascal, that is flammable gases, ignitable when in a mixture of 13% or less by volume with air, or have a flammable range with air of at least 12% points regardless of the lower flammable limits. So now we have already discussed about this fire and explosions, what exactly the lower explosive limit, what exactly the upper explosive limits. So depending on the percentage of the chemical present in that air, on that basis you can define the flammability criteria. You can define whether this chemical is flammable or not. Now we are discussing about the gases. If the gases are present at 20 degrees Celsius at 1 atmosphere, that is 101.3 kilopascal, and if the range that is from 12 to 13% in the air by volume, then if the chances of fire are there, then it is called as flammable gases. Now when we are talking about the extremely flammable liquids, chemicals which have flash point lower than or equal to 23 degrees Celsius and boiling point less than 35 degrees Celsius. So this is the criteria where you can define extremely flammable liquids. So the liquids which are having the flash point lower than or equal to 23 degrees Celsius and boiling point less than 35 degrees Celsius, then it is called as extremely flammable liquids. Means even at 23 degrees Celsius the liquid is having the potential to catch the fire. At the temperature of 35 degrees Celsius the liquid is having the potential to boil itself. So for that basis then these chemicals is called as extremely flammable liquids. Then very highly flammable liquids. So very highly flammable liquids, what is the criteria? The chemicals which have flash point lower than or equal to 23 degrees Celsius and initial boiling point higher than 35 degrees Celsius. Now in this case where extremely flammable liquids are there, the boiling point is less than 35 degrees Celsius. Now when we are talking about very highly flammable liquids, then the boiling point is higher than 35 degrees Celsius. So if the boiling point is more than 35 degrees Celsius, but the flash point is less than 23 degrees Celsius, then it is called as very highly flammable liquids. Now the next is highly flammable liquids. Chemicals which have flash point lower than or equal to 60 degrees Celsius, but higher than 23 degrees Celsius. So on the basis of flash point, because when the flash point is less than 23 degrees Celsius, then that may be a case of extremely flammable liquids or that may be a case of very highly inflammable liquids. Because in these cases, it is clearly mentioned that flash point should be less than 23 degrees Celsius. But when the flash point is more than 23 but less than 60 degrees Celsius, then it is called as highly flammable liquids. And the next category is flammable liquids. The chemicals which have a flash point higher than 60 degrees Celsius but lower than 90 degrees Celsius, then it is called as flammable liquids. Now you can understand what exactly the flammable chemicals are. Under that, we are going to discuss only the flammable gases and extremely flammable liquids. So on the basis of these temperature conditions, on the basis of the flash point and boiling condition, we can define this different subcategories of the extremely flammable liquids. Then next category is explosive. So explosive means a solid or liquid or a pyrotonic substance or a mixture of substance or an article which is in itself capable by chemical reaction of producing a gas at such a temperature and pressure at such a speed as to cause damage to the surroundings. So this is the potential of that particular gas which can itself create a particular temperature and pressure condition after reacting with a chemical. So which can cause a damage to the surrounding, which is designed to produce an effect by heat, light, sound, gas or smoke or a combination of these as the result of non-detonate self-sustaining exothermic chemical reaction. So you can understand it is a non-detonating self-sustaining exothermic chemical reaction. So it is a type of reaction where temperature is going to increase. Then it is called as exothermic reactions. So after reaction, if the temperature of that reaction is going to increase, then that reaction is called as exothermic chemical reaction. And if it is non-detonating, it means that the speed of that wave is less than the speed of a sound, then it may be a non-detonating effect. But it is a dangerous and it may cause to the damage to the structure, damage to the plant, damage to the environment and damage to the people. So that may be in the form of heat, that may be in the form of light, sound, gas or smoke or combination of all these things. So if it is happen, then it is called as, the chemical is called as explosive. So this is the part 2 of schedule 1 where the list of hazardous and toxic chemicals are there. Now intentionally I have mentioned the starting chemicals, then I have mentioned the middle part and I have mentioned the last number, right? So in this part 2 of the schedule 1, there are 684 chemicals listed as a hazardous and toxic chemicals. So it is not possible to discuss each and every chemicals. That is why I have mentioned this serial number 1 to 10, then from 424 to 434, because after this 434 there is amendment, and after an amendment the list is up to 684. So you can remember some of the chemicals like acetone, then acetone cyanohydride, etc. and up to 684, that is zirconium and compounds. So if any chemical which are using in your company, then you can remember that particular name of that hazardous or toxic chemicals as per this part 2. So you can check the chemicals which you are using, handling or storing in your factory, whether it is a hazardous or toxic chemical or not. So you can check this 684 chemical list from the part 2 of schedule 1. So now you can understand what exactly the schedule 1 is. Schedule 1, part 1, toxic chemicals, then flammable chemicals, then subcategories, then explosives, and this is the part 2. That is name of the chemicals listed in this list. Near about 684 chemicals are listed. Then schedule 2. So this is the reference to the rule 2E, sub rule 2, then 4LB, 42 and 6LB. The isolated storage at installations other than those covered by schedule 4. So other than the chemicals or the storage which are listed under the schedule 4, the remaining are listed in this schedule 2. So there are some example. What exactly this schedule 2 is focusing? So this focusing on the chemical naming and the threshold quantities in tons. So threshold quantity we have already discussed, that is maximum or permissible quantity as per as this schedule is concerned. So in terms of tons, for application of rule number 4, 5, 7 to 9. So when we are discussing about these rules, then in that rule they have mentioned about the column number and this rule. So this is the meaning of that particular rule or sub-rule. So when in the rule 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, they have mentioned the column 3. So this is column 1, 2 and 3. Column 3 of schedule 2. So that when we are reading that rules, then we should jump to that particular column and to the particular schedule, so that we can understand easily what exactly this schedule is going to focus, what exactly the parameters involved in this schedule, and then we can learn about that rule or sub rule in detail easily. So if you want to practice these schedules and rules, if you want to understand the rules and schedules thoroughly, then you have to read the rules as well as schedules simultaneously. So this is the example where threshold quantity of acrylonitrile 350 tons, then ammonia 60 tons. Threshold quantity is given as per this rule number 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. And for the application of rule number 10 to 15, then the quantities or threshold quantities are different. So for the ammonia, 60 tons is the capacity, that is threshold quantity for rule number 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. If the application is different, that is which is related to the rule 10 to 15, then the threshold quantity is 600 tons. So depending on your requirement, depending on the application, depending on the industrial activity, the rule is applicable, and with the reference of that rule, the threshold quantity varies. And likewise, there are 30 chemicals listed in this schedule 2. Then schedule 3, reference rule number 2E3, 5, 6A, 1A, list of hazardous chemicals for applications. So here the list of hazardous chemicals are given for applying. So for applications, these chemicals are listed of rules 5 and 7 to 15. So under the rules we have mentioned that schedule 3 for part 1, for part 2, or group 1, group 2, group 2, 3, 4, 5, or some columns. So that meaning is, now you can understand what exactly this column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 under this part 1 or group 1. So this is the schedule 3, list of hazardous chemicals for application. Rule 5, 7 to 15 is applicable. Under the part 1, named chemicals are given, and under that part 1 again there are 5 groups. So this is the group 1, that is toxic chemicals. So under this group 1 toxic chemicals, the details are serial number, chemicals, threshold quantities for application rule 5, 7, then 9 and 13 to 15, then for application of rule 10 to 15, and CAS number. So CAS number is nothing but the chemical abstract service number. It is unique number. You can identify that particular chemical anywhere on globe. So that is identified by the CAS number or the UN number. Now in this case here CAS number is given. Then under this group 2, toxic chemicals list is there. Under the group 3, highly reactive chemicals are there. Group 4, explosive chemicals are there. And under part 2, classes of substances not specifically named in part 1 are given as a group 5. So in the part 1, group 1, 2, 3, 4, that is toxic chemical, highly reactive chemicals and explosive chemicals are mentioned. And under this part 2, group 5, flammable chemicals are there. So there are different listing of these hazardous chemicals. So that characteristics may be flammable, that may be toxic, that may be highly reactive, that may be explosive. So all these categories are given under these 5 groups, under this part 1 and part 2 of schedule 3. Then schedule 4 has given some unit operations and unit reactions where the hazardous chemicals can operate. So installations for the production, processing or treatment of organic or inorganic chemicals using for this purpose among others. So the unit processes may be alkylations, that may be amination by ammonosis, carbonylation, condensation, dehydrogenation, esterification, halogenation and manufacture of halogens, hydrogenation, hydrolysis, oxidation, polymerization, sulfonation, desulfurization, nitration, then phosphorus containing compounds manufacturing, then pesticides and of pharmaceutical products formulation. Then the unit operations are distillation, extraction, salvation, mixing. So all these unit operations and unit processes we have already discussed in one of the session, that is unit operation and unit process. So I am not going to uh, discuss all these unit process and unit operations again. Installation for distillation, refining or other processing of petroleum or petroleum product. Then installation for the total partial disposal of solid or liquid substances by incineration or chemical decomposition. Then installations for production, processing or treatment of energy gases, for example LPG, LNG, SNG. Then installation for the dry distillations of coal or lignite. Installation for the production of metals, non-metals or some other processes by means of electrical energy. So all these things are included under this schedule 4. So while doing this unit operations, while operating these unit operations, while handling these chemical reactions or unit processes, while storing, while treating with the energy gases, while treating with the disposal techniques for these solids or liquid substances, you have to take the safety measures. So all these things are given under this schedule 4, rule number 2HI. Then schedule 5 reference is rule 2B and 3. So in this rule, the names of authority and the duties and corresponding rule is given under the schedule 5. So there are various authorities. I have mentioned only one. So one of the main authority for this MSIHC rule is MOEF, that is Ministry of Environment and Forest under Environment Protection Act 1986. The Chief Controller of Imports and Exports under Import and Export Control Act 1947. Central Pollution Control Board or State Pollution Control Board under Environmental Act 1986, as the case may be. So this is one of the example where authority is mentioned. So MOEF, Import and Export, CPCB and SPCB. These are the main authorities with legal backing, and the duties and corresponding rules of these authorities are notification of hazardous chemicals. So notification is the main duty of these authorities, and the rules are 2E1, 2C2 and 2E3. Import and Export Act authority for this, the duty is import of hazardous chemical as per rule 18. 1. Enforcement of directions and procedures in respect of isolated storage of hazardous chemicals. Regarding notification of major accidents as per rule 5 and 5.2. Notification of site as per rule 7 to 9. Safety reports in respect of isolated storages as per rule 10 to 12. Preparation of on-site emergency plan as per rule 13. Imports of hazardous chemicals and enforcements of directions and procedures on import of hazardous chemical as per rule 1. So all these are the various duties of these authorities, right? And likewise there are various authorities and various duties and corresponding rules are mentioned under the schedule 5. I have mentioned only one. Then schedule 6, reference rule number 5, the information to be furnished regarding the notification of a major accident. So in this rule 5, we have mentioned that the detailed information is given in the schedule 6. So this is the information, this is the main criteria or the parameters under this schedule 6. So I haven't mentioned the sub rules, sub categories, sub parameters under these rule, parameters 1 to 8. I have mentioned only the main parameters. So for the details you can refer the schedule 6. So the for information regarding the major accident under this notification, you should give the detailed information like general data, type of major accident, description of the major accident, emergency measures taken and measures investigation to be taken to alleviate short-term effects of the accident, then causes of the major accident, nature and extent of damage, data available for assessing the effects of the accidents of the person and environment, steps already taken by or envisaged. So all this data should be filled by the occupier in the schedule 6, and there are again sub parameters are also given, so that data is given to the concerned authority. Then schedule 7, information to be furnished for the notification of site. So under this schedule there are two parts. Part 1 clearly indicates that the particulars to be included in the notification of site, and part 2 particulars to be included regarding the pipeline. So there are these two parts. So I haven't mentioned again the detail of all these part 1 and part 2 particulars. You have to refer this schedule 7 for the detailed information. Then schedule 8, rule number 10.1, focusing on the information to be furnished in a safety report. So in the rule 10, we have already discussed about the safety report. We have to submit the safety report to the concerned authority within that particular time of span, and for that safety report, the detailed information, detailed parameters and sub parameters are given under this schedule 8. Then schedule 9, rule number 17, safety data sheet. It is also called as material safety data sheet. So this rule number 17, that is collection, dissemination of information of these hazardous chemicals. So for that rule, this safety data sheet is designed in the Indian safety data sheet with reference to this schedule 9 and rule number 17 of MSIHC. There are 10 points, but if you refer the safety data sheets on the Google or on other search engine, then you may find the 16 points. But that 16 point safety data sheet is of European standard, and we are referring this Indian standard MSIHC rule 1989. That is why here only 10 points are there. So these 10 points are chemical identity, physical and chemical data, fire and explosion hazard data, reactivity data, health hazard data, preventive measures, emergency and first aid measures, then additional information or references, manufacturer or supplier data, disclaimer. So all these points and sub points with detailed information and examples we have already discussed in one of the session, which indicates material safety data sheet as a title. Then schedule 10, rule 18, format for maintaining the records of hazardous chemicals imported. So whenever you are going to import hazardous chemicals with reference to the rule 18, then you have to follow the guidelines. You have to fill the information which is given under this schedule 10. Then schedule 11 with reference to 13, the details to be furnished in the on-site emergency plan. So we have already discussed the on-site emergency plan in the rule 13. So when you are going to tackle the actual emergency plan, actual emergency, before that you should be prepared with the some of the plan. So occupier is the main responsible person. So the occupier and the responsible person details should be given in this schedule 11. Then the emergency exits, then evacuation procedures, some alarm systems, where to go, how to go, and how to tackle this situation. All these details, what are the chemicals, hazardous chemicals, what are the processes or operations, what are the parameters, the threshold quantity of the storage, what actual storage of your hazardous chemicals, and all the major accident hazard should be mentioned in this on-site emergency plan. Whether you have conducted this mock drill, which mock drill is essential, when to conduct this mock drill, and whether the expert persons or some third party agencies are involved in this planning of this on-site emergency plan or not. So all the information is given to the concerned authority with reference to this Schedule 11. And Schedule 12 in the same way, focusing on the off-site emergency plan. So these are the 12 schedules and 20 rules of this MSIHC Rule 1989. So it is impossible to give each and every detail of all the schedules and rules in single session, but I have tried to focus all the rules and I have tried to focus all the schedules titles so that you can at least understand and remember some of the rules and some of the schedules. Right? So these are the salient feature as far as the pollution control board is concerned. So you can go through these salient features that MOEF has notified this MSIHC. Then with reference to the schedule 1, hazardous chemicals are listed. In the schedule 6, the information given by the occupier should be mentioned. Then some authority should be listed, and these authority are going to analyze your major accident report. Then the criteria are given as for the isolated storage as per the schedule 2, and in the schedule 7 the total written reports and their parameters are given, and in the schedule 8 safety report details information is given. Then in the schedule 11 the on-site emergency plan details information is given. In the schedule 5 off-site emergency plan information is given. Then for the importer of hazardous chemical shall notify the authority, and the authority have to approve their plan or reject their plan with the reasons. Then in the schedule 10 the hazardous chemical details which are going to import is given, and the road transportation of hazardous chemicals should be in accordance in the Central Motor Vehicle Rule 1989. So these are the salient features of the MSIHC 99. Thank you.